Chair of the Regulatory Agencies Committee for the NCBFAA. I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's presentation. Just a reminder, all attendees are in listen-only mode. Questions can be submitted by typing them into the question box on the webinar toolbar. We will address the questions at the end of the presentation, time permitting. Any remaining questions will be reviewed and addressed by APHIS and responded to. This webinar will be recorded, and both the presentation and the webinar will be made available to attendees after the conclusion of the webinar. In addition, the webinar will be posted at the NCBFAA and USDA APHIS websites. We're excited to be partnering with the APHIS team to present this series of import webinars in preparation for the August 2020 mandatory filing date. This presentation is focused on APHIS-required import data for cut flowers and plants for planting. We hope you'll find this information valuable for you and for your clients. So without further delay, we'll get the presentation started, and I'd love to turn it over to the APHIS team.
Thank you for those opening remarks. My name is Richard Leshin. On the phone with us as well is Brett Miller and Marco Flores, all members of the APHIS ACE team. And without further ado, we'll get started. This presentation describes how to submit APHIS-required data for regulated plants for planting and cut flowers and greenery within the Department of Homeland Security's Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE. This presentation assumes the viewer has reviewed the first presentation using the Automated Commercial Environment, ACE, to submit import data for APHIS-regulated commodities. APHIS-regulated plants for planting commodities include plants, seeds, and bulbs. Plants for planting are plants intended to remain planted, to be planted, or replanted. Plants are any plant or plant part that is capable of propagation, including a tree, tissue culture, plantlet culture, pollen, shrub, vine, cutting, graft, bid, bulb, root, and seed. APHIS-regulated cut flowers and greenery commodities refer to the fresh cut portion of the plant when it is imported for decoration or ornamentation. Please note this presentation will not address specific import admissibility questions, but rather provide general information about import conditions and ACE data entry. Plants for planting and cut flowers and greenery are regulated by APHIS Plant Protection and Quarantine, which is agency program code APQ, and in the APHIS Core Message Set. This slide and the following slides are diagrams from the APHIS Core Message Set implementation guide. These diagrams, along with others from the guide, may be useful for filers to understand the flow of the import data required for plants for planting and cut flowers and greenery. Definitions of the codes may be found in the Appendix PGA, and the technical rules enforcing use of certain codes may be found in the implementation guide. This diagram shows the overall PG10 commodity category and type, PG14 LPCO, and PG01 agency processing code for all APQ regulated commodities. Filers can use this diagram to find the specific business diagrams in the APHIS Core PGA Message Set implementation guide for AP0600 commodities, which are highlighted within the regulated blocks. AP0400 and AP0800 commodities. We will begin this presentation with propagated material. This diagram is one of the two highlighted on the previous slide. This diagram shows the relevant PG06 processing type code, PG10 category codes, PG10 commodity qualifier and characteristic codes for AP0400 commodities. Plants for planting currently has 3 choices for category codes: 401 bulbs and underground portions of dormant perennials, 402 plants for planting or propagation, and 403 seeds for planting or sowing. Further definitions can be found in the Appendix PGA. The category codes are further broken down into characteristic qualifier codes, which further define the commodity. For example, pine trees for planting may not require a PG06 processing code, but it would be reported as category 402, plants for plants. This would be followed by a commodity qualifier, A41, physical state, and characteristic qualifier as rooted, RTG. This slide shows some of the data elements that must be provided in the APHIS Core PGA message set. Please refer to the APHIS Core implementation guide for a list of mandatory data elements that must be entered. Please note, scientific names are required for the AP0400 commodities. When shipment information is entered into the message set, it must include coding which directs the information to the agency and program unit commissioned with regulatory authority over that commodity. For imports of commodities regulated by APHIS, the government agency processing code for APHIS is APH. For commodities regulated by APHIS Plant Protection and Quarantine, the government agency processing code is APQ. Most plants for planting products are inspected by APHIS Plant Inspection Stations, which is declared using the government agency processing code A02. If a shipment is pre-cleared, please identify it as A03, pre-cleared. The PG10 record line is the primary architecture used to help stakeholders correctly report commodities within the APHIS message. This record line is critical for APHIS message sets because it supports the ability to filter and efficiently align commodities into specific groups. The main data element, commodity category type, is a top-level grouping which allows commodities or products to be lumped and/or split into specific subgroups using the data elements associated with commodity categories and commodity characteristics. Plant protection and quarantine will continue to require and issue import permits. You must continue to submit government certifications as original paper documents, for instance, phytosanitary certificates or CITES certificates. As mentioned in previous presentation, APHIS PPQ issues plant and plant product permits have paperless link to ACE, provided the correct permit information is entered into the PGA message set. Provided the permit matches, filers do not need to submit the permit via paper or DIS. Please contact us if you are experiencing issues with the permit match feature. Information contained within the permit may also be of assistance when entering message set data. For example, the scientific name PG05 can be found in the box titled Articles. Local authorized party PG19 and 20 can be found as the permittee name box. Intended use PG01 and country of origin PG32 are listed within this document as well. The import permit type is determined from the requirements listed within the Code of Federal Regulations in regards to specific commodity and associated pests and/or pathogens. Numerous regulatory types within PPQ 587 permit to import plants and plant products can be utilized, which are listed within the prepared document. This example is for pine trees regulated under 7 CFR 319.37. Therefore, the required permit for entry is a PPQ 587-37 or PG14 type code A16. Please note, additional permit types may be required if the regulated commodity under plants for planting is considered to be regulated as a live plant pest, biological control agent, or noxious weed. PPQ 526 is considered a protected plant, PPQ 621, or being imported under a controlled import permit for developmental, experimental, or therapeutic purposes, PPQ 588. While the phytosanitary certificate itself must continue to be submitted in original paper form, the certificate number must be provided in the message set. This is important in order to ensure the correct certificate is attached to the corresponding message set and PPQ permit if required in the ACE system. Please note, a phytosanitary certificate is not always required. The Code of Federal Regulations will determine if one is required. Having a copy of the phytosanitary certificate will aid in the submission of the APHIS Core Message Set. Information required in the message set may be found on the certificate, such as exporter name and address, importer name and address, commodity description, genus, species, treatment types, and country of export. Here we will walk through an example of filing APHIS Core Message Set for planting, in this case, seeds for sowing. Many filings will be similar in nature with different commodity information being provided. This walkthrough is from PG line 01 until the end in PG numerical order. This may not be the order in which data is entered into your software. The filer would report agency code APH for USDA APHIS, program code APQ for plant protection and quarantine, processing code of A02 APHIS plant inspection station, and an intended use code for grow out. In this scenario, the importer identified they will be submitting electronic images for PGA review. All entity and proprietary business is treated as confidential, and as such, that field should always be coded as Y for yes. The genus and species is identified as Zeomyia maize. Primarily, this data element can be found on the phytosanitary certificate, permit, or provided by the importer. In the PG06 line, the filer would identify a source type code, in this case, HRV harvested, with a country code of BR for Brazil. The country of origin may be found on the phytosanitary certificate or permit. For the PG10 commodity characteristic information, a category type code of AP0400 will be used to identify the commodity as a plant for planting product. Category code further breaks this down with code 403, seeds for planting or sowing. The seeds for sowing category code has two qualifier codes, physical state and endangered species status. In this case, only A71 physical state would be chosen with a characteristic qualifier of LSL, or large seed lot. In this case, the import requires both a permit, type A17 permit to import plants and plant products, and a phytosanitary certificate, type A01, to be reported in the PG13, PG14 lines for LPCOs. For the permit, the date qualifier is 1, showing the expiration date of the permit. The transaction type would be 3 because it has a start and end date. The phytosanitary certificate would have a date qualifier 3, which is the date the certificate was signed, and a transaction type of 1 for single use. Remember, when entering the phytosanitary certificate number, to include all numbers, letters, or special characters. Certificate numbers will be used to match the original paper document with the submitted PGA message set. For the PG17 wildlife commodity information, APHIS requires only a specific common name, aka vernacular or colloquial name, in this case, corn. APHIS requires the reporting of contact and address information for 2 entities beyond what is found in CBP header data, previously reported in the PG1920 line. The ultimate consignee, code UC, and the customs broker code, CB, or if no customs broker, the importer code, IN. The ultimate consignee is the party in the United States to whom the overseas shipper sold the imported merchandise. If at the time of entry or release the imported merchandise has not been sold, then the ultimate consignee at the time of entry or release is defined as the party in the U.S. to whom the overseas shipper consigned the imported merchandise. If the merchandise has not been sold or consigned at the time of entry or release, then the ultimate consignee at the time of entry or release is defined as the proprietor of the U.S. premise to which the merchandise is to be delivered. In other words, the party who has been designated on the invoice packing list as the final recipient of the stated merchandise. APHIS also requires the reporting of contact and address information for LPCO authorized party where applicable. If an LPCO in PG1314 is reported, then LPCO authorized party and corresponding contact information, PG1920, is required. The LAP or local authorized party varies depending on LPCO type. In general, this is the issued to party or holder of the LPCO. For APHIS permits, the LAP is equivalent to the permittee, while certificates generally use the term issued to party. In some instances, certificates have two parties listed. Therefore, the entity who conveyed, requested, or paid for the certificate should be used. PG26 is used to identify the packing and quantity. In this case, the filer is using one to identify a single packaging and then is reporting that amount in kilograms. If the cargo is shipped via containers, that information will be reported in PG27. For PG30, the inspection status is I, product location for regulatory authority inspection. When reporting I for inspection status, the filer must report the arrival location as 2. The arrival location will be the first port of arrival and will be transmitted as the port code. For PG32 routing information, the shipment did not transit or transship other countries, so a code of 198 would be reported for the original location. For this example, Brazil, BR, would be reported as the country. Here we have another example, in this case, a plant for planting. In this case, the government agency processing code would be A02, plant inspection station. The genus and species would be reported in the PG05 line. Source type 262 will be reported for place of growth, followed by the country the dahlias were grown in. The PG10 record would identify category type AP0400 as a live plant. Category code 402 further categorizes the shipment as a plant for planting or propagation. The commodity qualifier code parameter is A40 for life stage being reported in the commodity characteristic qualifier as IMM or immature. The PG10 record would be repeated. The only thing that would change are reporting the qualifier code as A41 physical state and the qualifiers UNC for unrooted cuttings. The filer would still report the PG13 14 lines for the PPQ 587-37 code A16 permit to import plants and plant products. PGs 19 and 20 would be reported for the LAP of the permit and the ultimate consignee and customs broker or importer. PG26 packing information, PG30 arrival information, and PG32 commodity routing information would all still need to be reported. We will now transition into cut flowers. This diagram shows the relevant PG06 processing type code, PG10 category code, PG10 commodity qualifier, and characteristic codes for the AP0800 cut flower commodity. Filers can find this diagram in the APHIS Core Message Set implementation guide. This diagram shows which PG10 data elements should be submitted based on the category code. Here are some data elements that drive the message set for cut flowers. Please note scientific names are required for AP0800 commodities. For imports of commodities regulated by APHIS, the government agency code is APH. They're regulated by Plant Protection and Quarantine. The government agency program code would be APQ. Many cut flowers and greenery products are inspected by CBP Agriculture, which is declared using the government agency processing code A01. However, there are certain pre-clearance conditions, and under those, a filer would use A03. When reporting cut flowers and greenery, you must also report a PG 19 and 20 crop grower code, or DFI. Plant Protection and Quarantine will continue to require and issue import permits. You must continue to submit government certifications as original paper documents, such as FIDOs and CITES certificates. Some cut flower imports are pre-cleared. All flowers from Chile have been approved for pre-clearance programs, and some genre of flowers from Jamaica have been approved. If the import is from Chile or Jamaica, it might have a PPQ 203 form as well. The information contained within a PPQ 203 may also be of an assistance when entering message set data. For example, the common specific name PG17 can be found in the box titled commodities. Treatments PG06 and country of origin PG32 or PG06 are listed within this document. This diagram shows an entry with 4 entry lines and 4 message sets. 3 of the entry lines are associated with cut flower stems pre-assembled into bouquets within boxes. This example shows the flowers being reported using multiple HTS codes separating the genre by each entry line and message set. When using this technique, APHIS are using PG07 identity number to associate or tie each separate entry line and genus of cut flowers back to the total amount of mixed bouquets. The amount of boxes and bouquets should only be reported on one of the associated entry lines. Single genus flowers do not need the PG07 record line and only need the amount of boxes and stems. Item type should be reported as an individual product, P, even if they are a portion of a bouquet. Note, not all record lines are depicted on this diagram. Only the pertinent record lines associated with the structure of using multiple HTS codes and entry lines are shown. This diagram shows an entry with 2 entry lines and 4 message sets. 3 of the message sets are associated with cut flower stems pre-assembled into bouquets within boxes, but in this case, they all fall under the same entry line. In this scenario, HTS General Rule number 3 was utilized. Only 1 HTS code and 1 entry line was used for the mixed bouquet. APHIS is not a subject matter on HTS filing and therefore recommends consultation with an import specialist for interpretation of the rules before filing in such a manner. The mixed bouquet entry line has 3 message sets reporting the cut flowers by genus. This technique allows the filer to omit the PG07 identity number record line because the individual cut flower genus are automatically associated or tied back to the total number of bouquets on the same entry line. This technique is recommended and preferred by APHIS if appropriate. The amount of boxes and bouquets should only be reported on 1 message set for bouquet entry line. Again, note that not all record lines are depicted, only the pertinent record lines associated with the structure of using single HTS codes and single entry lines are shown. Here we will walk through a single example of filing an APHIS Core Message Set for a cut flower bouquet. This example shows using multiple HTS codes for filing, which includes use of the PG07 line. APHIS does recommend using a single HTS code and repeating the message set omitting the PG07 line. Many filings will be similar in nature with different commodity information being provided. This walkthrough is from PG line 01 until the end in PG numerical order. Again, this may not be the order in which data is entered into your software. The filer would report agency code APH for USDA APHIS, program code APQ for plant protection and quarantine, processing code of A01 for CBP agriculture, and an intended use code 135, consumer use as a non-food product, and a subcode of 0.035, plant for commercial sale. In this scenario, the importer identified they will be submitting electronic images for PGA review. As a reminder, cut flowers do require the submission of an invoice. All entity and proprietary business is treated as confidential, and as such, that field should always be coded as Y for yes. Identifying the different species within the bouquet requires the item type to be reported as an individual product, even if they are a portion of a bouquet. The genus and species is identified as Rosa species. Primarily, this data element can be found on phytosanitary certificates, permits, or provided by the importer. In the PG06 line, the filer would identify a source type code, in this case 262 place of growth, with a country code of Colombia, or CL. The country of origin may be found on phytosanitary certificates, permits, or other documents provided by the importer. In this scenario, the shipment is reported as a cut flower bouquet reported under multiple HTS lines. APHIS requires the reporting of PG07 line to designate the flowers as part of a bouquet grouping, BQG, and the number to designate which flowers are part of the same bouquet. If the bouquet is reported under a single HTS line with repeated message sets, or if flowers were not part of a multi-general bouquet, then this code is not required. For the PG10 commodity characteristic information, a category type code of AP0800 would be used to identify the commodity as a cut flower category type. The category code further breaks this down with code 801, cut flowers only. The cut flower category code has two qualifiers, physical state and endangered species state. And in this case, only A81 physical state would be applied with characteristic qualifier as BROS, or rose bouquet. In this scenario, roses from Colombia do not require an LPCO reported in the PG 1314, but an invoice must be submitted via GIS with a GIS implementation guide dot code of APH02. For the PG17 wildlife commodity information, APHIS requires only a specific common name, aka vernacular or colloquial name, in this case rose. APHIS requires the reporting of contact and address information for two entities beyond what is found in CBP header data, in this case the ultimate consignee and the customs broker or importer when a customs broker isn't used. PG26 is used to identify the packing and quantity. In this case, there are 3 levels of reporting for the bouquet, and PG26 will need to be reported 3 times to account for each. The innermost package will be reported with the highest qualifier, or 3. The unit of measure would be the number of stems, or STM. So the second most outer layer would be reported with qualifier 2. In this case, the unit of measure would be the number of bouquets, or BQT. Finally, the outermost layer of packing will be reported with qualifier 1. In this case, the unit of measure will be reported as boxes, or BX. If cargo is shipped via container, that information will be reported in PG27. For PG30, the inspection status is I, product location for regulatory authority inspection. When reporting I for inspection status, the filer must report the arrival location code as 2. The arrival location will be the first port of arrival and will be transmitted as the port code. For PG32 routing information, the shipment did not transit or transship other countries, so a code of 198 would be reported for the original location of the shipment, or in this case, CO Colombia would be reported. I apologize, I was a slide ahead with that reporting. Here we have the next flower reported in the bouquet. In this scenario, this is being reported as separate HTS lines. Much of the information will be reported the same as the previous flower. The PG05 would change for the species to be the genus and species to be chrysanthemum species. For each flower, you will need to report the PG07 as BQG bouquet with the same identity number. 1. Continue to report the PG10 as cut flowers only, code 801, and as part of a rose bouquet, BROS. PG17 will be reported as pom-poms, the common vernacular name, and in this case, a PG1314 line is required due to the need for a phytosanitary certificate. For PG19 and 20, please report the customs broker or importer, ultimate consignee, local authorized party, and the grower or DFI. For PG26, you will only need to report one level of packing, in this case stems, STM. The other levels were reported with the previous flower. Continue to report the arrival information PG30 and the routing information PG32. Here we have the final flower to be reported in the bouquet. In this scenario, this will be reported as a separate HTS line. Much of the information would again be reported in a similar fashion to the previous two flowers. The PG05 line would change, in this case, to genus and species of Alstroemeria species. For each flower, you will need to report the PG07 line as BQG bouquet with the same identity number as 1. Continue to report the PG10 as cut flowers only, 801, and as part of a rose bouquet, BROS. Lilies do not require the reporting of the PG13-14 line. For PG19 and 20, remember to provide the customs broker or importer information, the ultimate consignee, and the DFI grower information. For PG26, you will only need to report one level of packing, in this case stems. The other levels were reported with the first flower. Continue to report the arrival information PG30 and the routing information PG32. APHIS Core Message Set questions can be sent to ace.itds@usda.gov. Please be sure to provide us with screenshots, if possible, error codes, and other relevant information to help expedite the answering of your questions. APHIS and CBP have multiple resources available to filers to assist with APHIS Core PGA data submission. You can find all these resources on our APHIS ACE website. The APHIS ACE website lists guidance on any exemptions on filing message set and entry types where APHIS Core flagging is enforced. In addition, the APHIS ACE website links to many CBP ACE appendices. For instance, the BIS Implementation Guide, Appendix R, CBP ACE BIS PGA forms list. APHIS import eligibility questions, does APHIS require an LPCO for reporting commodity, should be referred to the specific APHIS program that regulates the commodity. Resources for contacting APHIS regarding such admissibility questions can be found on the APHIS Import-Export webpage, with further linkage to those you can contact regarding admissibility questions. With that, I will turn it back over to Mike for closeout and questions.
Thank you, Ricky. Fantastic job. I can't thank the folks at APHIS enough for partnering with the NCBFAA to address this very important issue that's coming up very quickly in August. So we need to make sure that we do our homework and get ready for this implementation. We did have some questions that came in, and actually I jotted down a few myself. There was one question that referred directly back to your example with the bouquets. Can you confirm that it is acceptable to transmit a species of SP for all cut flowers?
But are you there? Is that true? Is that all of them will go under SP for species?
Not all. There are a few that, almost all of them, but there are a few that will need the species filled out, not just the genus. And that will be reflected on the phytosanitary certificate. If you don't have a phytosanitary certificate, then it is proper to just put SPP or SP. Great.
I know we've talked about this, Ricky, and I've had a couple of questions pop up, and I had jotted myself a note down as well. What kind of tools are there available to help folks with things like the genus and species, if you don't have that, if you only have a common name, you want to look it up, or other types of information that you might need to make the declarations for APHIS through customs. I believe that there is some software available on your website.
Specifically to the genus and species, I'm not sure of any software, but our website does have a lot of good tools for making the declarations, including the implementation guide, and we came out with a trade supplemental guide, which is a job aid for those filing message set.
Any suggestions where folks might be able to look up genus and species?
Yeah, I can supplement that. This is Brett again. One of the things that we like to use, and it is in the PGO2 section for a product code qualifier, we have 3 different world lists that you can reference. So it's in the product code qualifier, product code number of PGO2 in the IG. If you take a look, there's some websites there in that section that we link to, and we like to use the taxonomic serial number website, which we call TSN number. And then there's some specifically, especially with cut flowers, the cut flower industry has moved to what they call global product classification BRIC code, and almost all of the cut flower scientific information is in that site, and because the cut flower industry worked directly with GS1 to do that. And then there's also United Nations serial numbers that you can use. But many other university sites, many other locations, you can find the scientific names of both propagated material and cut flowers. You know, the team even tends to just use a search engine to find most things fairly quickly. If you do want to tie your product codes for auto-populating 3 areas, if you program your software to use the product code number that populates the common name and the scientific name, we recommend those 3 world lists that is located on the product code number in PGO2 in the IG. So take a look at that, and you'll get an idea there of some good places to go. And we like to recommend, and some of the brokerage software companies have already done this. They've already programmed propagated material and cut flowers to use these lists, and they auto-populate 3 locations in the message set just by picking one thing. So I think that'll help you guys out.
Great. Now, getting back to common names, one thing, being a gardener, I know when you go to the store and you buy seeds, you're not just buying a package of cucumber seeds. There are different types. Are you looking for the lowest common denominator for the descriptions and the common names like cucumber or corn, or do you want it more specific like sweet corn or bicolor corn or Indian corn? How descriptive do you want those common names?
We would like those as descriptive as possible, but you know, we're very lenient on the common name. We really are focused on the scientific name, but if you can do the variety, you know, of common name, we know that in some cases there's multiple common names, you know, for even one thing. So we know that. We're not worried about it very much. You're going to have your OI description and your common name section to kind of describe that. So we're very lenient on the common name stuff, but scientific name is really where we regulate. We regulate at the scientific name, at the genus level in most things, but sometimes down to the species.
Mm-hmm. Now, sticking with the seed theme, what's the threshold amount to differentiate between large seed lots and small seed lots? Does that vary between types of seeds, or is there a general rule?
There is a general rule. Ricky, do you happen to know that one off the top of your head? I can't remember that one.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but we will be creating
Hey,
sorry, go ahead.
I think it's 50. 50. Sorry, I was on mute. This is Jeff. You're talking about the small seed permit versus large seed lot. I believe the cutoff is 50. It's got to be the same taxon.
Seeds. 50 seeds
per packet. For a
yeah,
50
that
seeds,
sounds
I think,
correct.
Per packet per single taxon.
Okay, this is a real good. Actually, it's a two-part question. Are there any options to do PGA corrections after the declaration is accepted, and kind of continuing on in that vein? Are there any penalties that could be imposed for clerical errors or a misdeclaration?
I believe that we will accept corrections up until, for instance, with the plants for planting, when it's finally loaded into our system, that is kind of the hard stop on it for us. However, we are working towards further allowing corrections. At this time, at least in the intermediary, we'd just like to see people submitting them, so we'll ask for corrections, and there will always be a period of time that will allow for correction of the message set. However, if upon inspection it's not properly identified, then CBP Agriculture may take further action, but that will be an operational decision by CBP Agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Marco. I know from a design standpoint that that yes, corrections are allowed through they call them CA transactions. So and that's straight from the Trade Transformation Office.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How is the PG02 processing code determined for disclaims?
Can you repeat that?
How is the PG02 processing code determined for disclaims?
You don't need.
I think that's actually a PG01, the government agency processing code for disclaim. We're not worried about that. It's a field that if it's the government agency processing code, it's optional anyways. So
okay.
If don't know, since it's a disclaim, you can always just put CBP Agriculture in there, since they're going to review the disclaim anyways and make sure that it's correct. But we're not worried about the government agency processing code on disclaims.
You know, having been involved in this for as long as you folks have, and seeing some of the testing that's been done, can you share with us what you see maybe is some of the biggest challenges that customs brokers may have, and that members of the import community may have, things to watch out for, maybe that could trip people up?
You want to go first, Ricky, or you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Off the top of my head, I think the context has changed. From importers. Importers are still, required to provide all of the data. The difference here is that importers are providing all this data instead of on paper through shippers. They're providing it to brokers. And so I think the context has changed, where brokers are now having the heavy lift and the business process has changed. So I think working with your importers is really where you're going to get tripped up the most, I think. And they are still responsible for understanding how to import their product from a regulatory perspective, knowing how to contact us. Things haven't changed in that sense. Importers are still looking to us to help them with admissibility, but once they get past that, they really have to help their filers and brokers process the importation through the message set. So I think that's where I see most of the change in the way everything's working. Maybe someone else would comment specifically about message sets, but that relationship between importers and brokers, I think, is the biggest issue.
This is Ricky again. The big tip I would give is something that Brett talked about earlier with the coding and autofilling based on different identification numbers. Anything you can do to work with your software providers to autofill as many things as possible could be very helpful. We were at a conference and I believe someone spoke that they've done enough where they only actually have to enter 10 data elements for each message that they have to file. The rest is auto-populated by their software. So things like that can really help with saving time and making it go easier.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off that a little bit that as well. We designed the message set to key in on baskets of products that are associated with the PG10 record line. So how we did it is we wanted to put all the commodities in the PG10 commodity category type, and then have subcategories for each commodity category type. And so we found that a lot of the software companies are programming the system to be cascading. If you start in the flow chart with your PG10 commodity category and using your HTS code, then you start eliminating a lot of the data entry. It starts cascading down where it's a lot easier to enter the data.
Okay. Can the crop grower, also known as a DFI, be different than the shipper?
It can be. So the crop grower would be identified as the place where the crops were grown, whereas the shipper could be somebody different.
Now we have a couple more questions. Are we all set on that one?
Yeah, I think we're all set on that one. Sorry.
Okay. Is a paper notice of arrival still necessary?
Did you say is a paper notice of arrival still necessary?
Yes. I know there are some items like the phytosanitary, you would require the original, correct?
Correct. The paper notice of arrival is not necessary. If they wish to provide it, it can be scanned and uploaded into BIS.
Okay.
However, the message set itself is the notice of arrival. Local port policy and the way CBP agriculture, does things may vary, but the message set is equivalent to a notice of arrival.
Thank you. That was the next question I was going to ask. Some ports require specific things, like LAX requires a flower sheet, and we had questions about local port policies. So I guess that would have to be worked out with the ag officers at those specific ports.
Correct. We're not going to overrule local port agreements that have been working for decades, to make sure things go smoothly. We're just converting, as much as we can from paper to electronic. So a lot of local stuff will continue as it always has, just to make things smoother. And then, as people are more comfortable, some of that stuff will drop off naturally.
Okay. Well, I've gone through all the questions that we had. So again, I'd like to thank all of the folks at APHIS for their very hard work on setting up these seminars, webinars, and just remind everybody that we will be providing copies of the presentation material, as well as posting recordings of the webinar to both the USDA APHIS website and the NCBFAA website. So with that, this concludes today's webinar, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining. The NCBFAA will be sending an email out with PDF copies of the presentation, as I mentioned, and the webinar will be posted to both the agency and the association's website. Reminder that this webinar is eligible for 1 CCS credit. Please email ei@ncbfaa.org to claim your CCS credit. This information will also be included on the follow-up email. If you're attending with a group, please send one email for the group and with a list of attendees instead of sending multiple emails. And thank you very much. And Rick, my gratitude to everyone at APHIS, and we look forward to working with you as August comes around. Thank you.
Yes, we'd like to thank the NCBFA, and also as a last reminder, the message set is in operation now. You can start submitting message sets now.